My name is Joanne Parsont. I am the Director of Education for the California Film Institute. You may know us as the organization that runs the Mill Valley Film Festival. We also own this theater, which we run 365 days a year. And we have this incredible education program that we do, which throughout the year brings students to the theater, to the festivals. We send filmmakers into classrooms. We teach production classes. We have summer camps. But we also have this incredible opportunity to work with a variety of local organizations and nonprofits and community groups. And I guess it's been 4 years that 4 years ago that two incredible people came to me from the wellness centers in the Tam Union High School District, Jessica Colvin, the Wellness Center Director, and her partner in crime, Betsy Ziegler, and said, we want to do a film series. And I said, okay. And that was it. And here we are 4 years later, still doing this film series, which has been one of the most gratifying things. Just to be able to, at the Film Institute, we know and we live by the philosophy that film has the capacity to really, engage people in discussion and conversation and, bring issues to the fore that sometimes are more challenging to talk about just one-on-one, or that sometimes they can, make it clear that we are not alone in the ways that we are experiencing the world and life, and to be able to discuss them as a community. So we kind of created this series based along that philosophy and ways for us to be able to talk about things that affect teen health. Oftentimes, mental health seems to be, of course, the most primary that's coming up a lot lately. So very valuable and meaningful to be able to continue to talk about it. So when this film came across my desk, this film, Anxious Nation, I knew that it was perfect for this series. I was also, I had worked with one of the directors, Vanessa Roth, many, many years ago in another film, and was very excited to be able to work with her again, and so thrilled to meet her co-director, Laura Morton, who you'll meet in the very beginning of this film, who's really integral to how this story even got started and decided to make this film. And the key thing that we do in this series is, we don't just show you the film and say, okay, go home and talk about it. We actually make sure we stay here first and have an opportunity to talk about it in a little bit more depth with some people who have, some particular expertise around the issue. So I'm really excited for our panel discussion following today's film. We not only have both Vanessa and Laura, who flew in here for this event tonight, like they came from far, in order to be here for this screening, and we're so thrilled for them to be here. But we also have a few other people to round out that panel. A local expert, anxiety specialist from UCSF, Tracy Foose is here. One of the Wellness Center directors, Jen, is here, as well as a student from Redwood High School. We never have a panel discussion about teen issues without welcoming teen to that conversation, because it would be pointless. So really thrilled for Ashley Bear to join us as well. So we're going to have, this is a little bit longer film than some of our film. It's about an hour and 40 minutes. I know it's a Wednesday night. I don't know what night it is. Apparently it's a Wednesday night. But please stick around. It is very much worth the conversation. That's why a lot of us, that's really why we're here. It's about to be able to have that dialogue and just, dig a little bit deeper. There'll also be some resources that we'll send you home with. But it's just, we want to make this an opportunity for you guys to really just kind of dig into this issue that we know we're all dealing with in a variety of ways, and how that looks and how we can, better manage ourselves, our kids, our relationships, in school, at home, all those things. There's a lot to dig into this film. So sit back, enjoy the film. All of our amazing panelists will be here after. Stick around for that, and we really look forward to that dialogue. Thank you guys for coming out. We actually sold out this house, and for some reason, some silly people didn't show up, so stick with us here. You guys are our core, and we really appreciate you coming out and spending the night with us. Enjoy. Okay, I would love to bring up our incredible panel. First and foremost, the directors of Anxious Nation, Laura Morton and Vanessa Roth. And I would like to welcome Dr. Tracy Foose. She is an anxiety specialist and an associate professor at the UCSF School of Medicine. Jen Kenny-Baum, she is a Tam Union High School District Wellness Coordinator and Internship Supervisor. And Ashley Bear, a student at Archie Williams High School. Choose the mic that matches your outfit. Darn, I didn't get the purple one somehow this time. So first, Laura and Vanessa, thank you so much for making this film. Obviously there's, a little bit in the film at the beginning that sort of explains your motivation for making it in the first place. And obviously, your daughter. Can you talk a little bit though, how do you dive into a subject of this magnitude, in order to try and tell a story that will have the kind of impact that we hope it will have in the room?
Well, my running line has been that I never had anxiety until I started making a movie about anxiety. Right. So, but as a parent, I really was feeling incredibly defeated, and I felt like I was failing my child. And I couldn't imagine if my family was feeling that way, if I was feeling that way. I really couldn't imagine how other families were getting through it. I'm a storyteller by trade. I'm a published author numerous times, 21 New York Times bestsellers. So I'm a good storyteller, and I knew there was a story here that needed to be looked at. And we started making this film in 2019, so before the pandemic. And anxiety was already an epidemic in 2019, and along came COVID and just poured gasoline all over that fire. So it was an undertaking, and it's a complicated topic. But when you team up with the right people and you get creative with your storytelling, with the art, which I think is so spectacular in this film, the cartoons, I think, all of that, and that's the brainchild of Vanessa Roth.
Can you talk a little bit about your collaboration and how you kind of brought that together? Because you both bring elements of storytelling, like you said, in different respects and different experience. But I mean, clearly there's a melt there of what you brought to the table.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are both moms, and so we understood from sort of parent perspective. And then I, a long time ago, went to social work school and did clinical social work with kids and teenagers, and have spent a lot of time making films with kids and families. And I think that what we both just agreed with each other about is we really just wanted to tell a very honest, true, authentic story that gave voice to the experiences and from the experience of the kids and families, but also wanted to make sure we had some skills kind of woven in there, with the experts, but again, without making it just a talking head film. We both really agreed on wanting something that got a little bit more interior. It's so hard if you don't experience anxiety, I think, to really understand the internal stuff. And so I think, again, showing the scenes of the kids that when they were having panic attacks, it's a whole sort of other topic really about like the ethics of that, because I was always hesitant of worrying, like when they see the film later, is it going to make them feel badly to have seen that? But I will be happy to say that all the kids actually, it's now been some years since they filmed those moments, and they actually really love the film and feel proud of it and feel like good that they've shared their experiences, and it's actually empowered them, I think, in a nice way, that they were, courageous enough to do that. So I think we just agreed on those things, and we agreed that, again, that the film is a jumping off point to conversation. It's obviously not presenting everything again, it's obviously a gigantic topic, but it was made for a thing like this, where hopefully it can spark some conversation and some deeper dives.
But I was wondering that too about your daughter. It sort of leads off with your daughter and the challenges that, you can see that she's having on screen. And if there was any reluctance on her part of wanting to take part and knowing that you were basically going to wrap the film around her story.
It's a good question, because she was 11 when we started making the film, and now she's 14 in high school. And the only restriction she's put on me is that we cannot show it in her high school. So, but she, I gave her every opportunity to see various cuts of the film. And if there was ever anything that she felt that she didn't want in the film, it just didn't live. But I will say, like all of our kids in the film, how courageous the kids and the parents. I think, there are some parents in the film that, it's tough to watch, but if we're being honest, I think we can see bits and pieces of ourselves in so many of them. So I'm so proud of our cast. And to Vanessa's point, I think that our kids, my daughter especially, and Jonah, who's now been to 2 screenings, and he's now like 6'2", like you can't even believe it. But I think that they really are excited that their participation will help other kids, and so that they it's like Emma Stone says at the end, we're all weirdos, right? So yeah.
Tracy, can you talk a little bit, you're an anxiety specialist, so maybe can you talk a little bit how you've evolved into that role and how kind of the role of anxiety has evolved in the role of young people, particularly, since the pandemic, but even prior to that, and just, how you're seeing that shifting and changing and, and how, basically what your primary strategies have been in working with young people?
I'll just talk for like an hour.
I was going to say that really was nothing much to answer.
Well, I can be very honest. I went into the treatment of anxiety disorders because when I was a resident in psychiatry, I thought that anxious people seemed to be the most relatable and nice. And I used to joke, with my early anxious patients, it's like the hair club for men, because I'm very much a Gen Xer who saw that commercial all the time. It's the hair club for men. I'm not just the president, I'm also a client. So I always tried to make patients feel comfortable by saying, when we look at anxiety, what we're seeing is some very pro-social, evolutionarily adaptive traits come out. We're seeing conscientiousness, we're seeing attention to detail, we're seeing high attunement to social cues. We're seeing something we call internalization of responsibility, which we heard a lot of those kids talk about how responsible they felt for themselves, for their appearance or reception in the social world, also for the impact that they were having on their parents. And then we see that in parents as well, this deep sense of responsibility for everything that's happening with their child, the sense that if my child is disappointed or suffering, that is my responsibility to correct, as opposed to, oh yeah, it sucks when you suffer in the world. Yeah, I'm here for you for your suffering, but not something I might be able to control. So that's, I think, what drew me into treating anxiety disorders is like, how is this incredibly helpful social combination of traits actually causing suffering, and in particular, seems to be getting more prevalent, which is interesting, and causing more suffering. So that's kind of where I come at this from.
So, because basically you're saying that there are, and I think as you guys also address in the film, there are positive sides to anxiety, and how do we find how do we find that balance?
Yeah, if you dial it down a little bit, anxiety is actually everything you want a human to be. So that's the thing. If you take away anxiety from a human, they're a sociopath, truly. If you take away the traits that set people up for having an anxiety disorder, like internalization of responsibility, seeking certainty or predictability, and physiologic sensitivity, then the opposite extreme of all of those things is sociopathy. So I love talking to patients about that because they're like, oh, it's really about managing these traits and dialing them down.
Jen, can you talk a little bit about from the sort of the school side of things and like what you're seeing on the ground, in school, and how you're working within the wellness centers to sort of help manage that, and what you're seeing, students kind of coming to you for?
Sure. First of all, I just also want to say thank you to the directors for making the film. Yeah. Thanks. I really appreciate that. Yeah. I think anything that's bringing more light to this subject is just fantastic for everyone out there who's ever been a warrior. There's something that you can relate to that you hope will make it feel less like a disorder and more like an experience that we all have at some period of time. I would say what I'm seeing right now, I've been working in Tam Union High School District for the last 7 years. I just switched over from working at a really large, intensely perfectionistic high school to smaller alternative school sites. But what I've seen over the last few years is, just what we witnessed in COVID is an intensity in the rise of anxiety and taking different kinds of forms, coming out in more eating disorders, coming out in more substance use, school avoidance, I'd say problems with peers, or just lots of social anxiety and more a rise in panic attacks. What I'm also seeing on the flip side that COVID has done, which is amazing, is that it's brought mental health into the conversation in a whole new way that I feel like I haven't seen before, particularly with young people, where it's on social media all the time. It's normalized in this really phenomenal way that's allowed for people to be asking for help and support. I think the first year coming back out of COVID, when we had our first full school year last year, Normally we see what a wellness center is, if you're not aware, is a spot at the school where students can come and ask for support, where there's an opportunity for kids to take a break if they're having panic or anxiety, or the chance to get connected to an individual to meet with one time or ongoing to offer support around different issues that are impacting their life. Most common would be like anxiety or depression. And I would see within those first, we usually have first few weeks of school where kids are adjusting and ramping up. And it was literally like day one, students walking down and being like, I'd like to get connected to a therapist today, please. It was like just no problems getting in and asking for support. So I think I've seen over a period of time in that way. And then I'd say in schools, we're so fortunate because we are where teens are, right? This is where they are for most of the day. And it's a really unique opportunity to connect and build relationships in an environment outside the home that's really accessible. We try really hard to create opportunities for kids to have some kind of coping skills that they can either do for the immediate moment. And that sometimes it looks a little gimmicky, but it's actually really helpful, is to have sort of sensory experiences to get you out of your head, right? Like painting, fidgets, water, tea, something to suck on, all of those things, like, cough drop, a mint. Those are all things to bring you back into your body, back into your senses, distract for a moment, and maybe get you past that immediate moment and then move along. And then the hope is if you have some of those things out and you need to deepen your skill set, that you can get connected to someone who can really relate to you and dig into your personal experience and help grow that skill set.
And are you seeing more students kind of helping each other? And are those also ways that or is that something that you're encouraging as well?
That's a good question. Are they helping each other? I mean, I feel like students are always helping each other, and they're sometimes always harming each other, right? You can see both, right? You can see how especially anxiety can fuel anxiety, right? Like that, like, and then, right? And we all are moving into a place of being like hyper aroused. But at the other time, there's a way in which I have also seen like friends completely normalize in a way that's like really validating, because you're like, oh, I'm not the only one, right? And then just humor starts to come into play, right? At all that.
Ashley, can you talk about how did the film resonate for you and your experience within, in your peers?
Yeah, so I actually am clinically diagnosed with anxiety on the spectrum, along with ADHD and a bunch of other things, making school the most wonderful place to go to when you're stressed out. And especially my senior year this year, while watching that film, I noticed, I was like, So when I was younger and doing all these things and like blocking it out, because my parents at the time weren't really aware of what was happening, and I'm a twin. So there's two of us running around, my older sister, who's like 6 years older than us. It was just like too much to control and tame. So watching that film, I was like thinking in my head, I'm like, wow, so many kids every day experience this. And one of the issues I have with anxiety is like, oh, my problems aren't important. There's so many different things going on around me, and my friends like experience so much worse. I don't want to put that burden on them. They have so much going on. It's a problem I'll get over by tomorrow. But when that happens, I end up overworking myself, and I'll get stressed to the point where I can't focus in school more than I already couldn't. I'll get distracted by that. I'll go home and be in an emotional mood, but then I'll be like, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to go run around. I'm going to get my energy out, which helps for a little bit until my body's completely drained from it. And at one point, I crash. And that crash is probably the hardest part for me to deal with, because coming out of that, I don't know how to help myself more. I feel like I'm missing this and this and this, whether it's schoolwork, friends, something going on in my head where it's like a million words per second developing, but not forming into sentences. So that's why I joined Peer Resource at my school, which is one of our wellness-led programs. And watching this film, we're actually doing a presentation on anxiety, depression, body image this week. And I was like, wow, there's so many different aspects that we can include and help students, especially with movies like this, that bring awareness to the fact and don't see it as an issue or a problem that somebody goes through, sees it as something that they can get help with and is normalized.
Thank you for that. So as you've sort of progressed, with what, how you've managed your anxiety over time, have you found it, particularly, I guess, maybe since COVID, as Jen was saying, that you feel more empowered to talk about it to other people?
I'm still working on that a little bit. But day by day, I know that there are certain things that help me release some of like the issues where I can walk in, put in my headphones, and I go to the gym. I'm working out, I'm putting away all the stressors I had for a second, letting myself take a minute and be like, okay, I'm doing this for me. I'm gonna get happier. I'm gonna get energetic. I'm gonna get energy out. I'm kind of push all the things that are impounding in my head and layering over one another away. And when I come out, I'm gonna take a deep breath and figure out how to manage one by one in that moment.
That's really powerful. So I know we've got a lot of parents in the room, and one of the things that I thought was most, or incredibly compelling in the film is sort of just the role that parents unintentionally can play in exacerbating anxiety and, the catastrophizing and, I've had that conversation with several friends, but, sort of watching the way that they do it and them knowing that they're doing it, but not being in control. So I'm just, if maybe you could just, any of you sort of talk a little bit about that, kind of phenomenon or of that process. And
I want to jump in on this because I just want to say that this audience was so into certain scenes, and our intention was to have people feel very seen and heard, right? But I was so appreciative of this audience in particular because there were certain scenes with parents that elicited laughter. It elicited, a little bit of shock or whatever it was. And I think that it's so good that if we hold up the mirror, right, then we can take a look at ourselves. We can take a look at, our environment and the impact that we do have as parents. But I wanted to just say I thought this audience was amazing.
Kudos to you guys. Yeah. So just maybe even in Jan and Tracy, how you're seeing that balance of parents at school and therapists and how we all work together and, and destigmatizing the fact that, and in that effort you were saying to help them to fix everything that they can't control, where's the balance in that? And I feel like that has shifted over time too, of a difference generationally of how parents are trying so hard to fix all those things while at the same time the anxiety is elevating it, how do we help parents find that balance and do the positive things?
First of all, I think if you're a parent and you watch that film and you did not feel anxious, I'm wondering if you have a pulse. So, I mean, you're a Marin parent who wants to make sure your child does well. You're definitely going to have some anxiety watching this. I feel like the biggest takeaways I'm seeing and learning as myself as a parent is, if at all possible, really take a look at your own mental health. I think in that same way, I don't know how y'all were before you had kids, but you're like, it's fine if I eat pizza tonight, who cares? And then all of a sudden you have a kid and you're like, we gotta have roasted vegetables every single night. This is what we're doing. We gotta have a lot of vegetables. This is what we're eating. We got good health. Well, you start to see the things that you need, you projecting them in your kid, and you're watching your kid and wanting to make sure they have all those things, but really are you looking, you're like, I'm fine, my anxiety's fine. My anxiety was always fine, I got by. And then you see it in your kid and you're like, that's not okay though for my kid. My kid's anxiety is not okay. But I do think if you have a chance and you're open to looking at your own mental health, by exploring that, doing some work and maybe some modeling, you are going to be really setting the tone that it is also okay for your kid to seek support and maybe learn some tools along the way for your kid. So that'd be one. And I'd say also consult as much as possible. Anxiety is so different with each person, with each kid. And you just have to be as flexible as possible and keep learning new tools. Some things work and then stop working. And consult with as many friends, family, therapists as possible. Tracy, advice?
Yeah. I would say all of that. And as a parent, I have 3 girls, 2 in middle school and 1 in grade school. And one thing that my husband and I try to do is talk about our anxiety in front of them and joke about it. So we talk about how we met in med school because neither of us could sleep. So of a cohort of highly neurotic people, we were the most neurotic. So we often joke, you guys will all have anxiety. We talk about our different flavors of anxiety. I will tell my kids, I sent out this text to friends and the friend just hearted it, but didn't answer. And that's so hard to say, like, does she want to go with me? Because she just put a heart, and that sense of uncertainty. And I think my kids find it really amusing that adults can have that same kind of social anxiety going on. The other thing that I like to encourage parents to do is not to make anxiety the enemy. In fact, to thank anxiety and say, this is just your guard dog barking at the door. It heard a knock. It has no idea what's on the other side. It's just trying to keep you safe. The enemy is avoidance. The enemy is deciding not to open the door because that dog is barking. So you can have your dog barking and say, it's cool, thank you. Thank you for letting me know you heard a knock at the door. I'm gonna open it. And so really talking your kids through, it's not anxiety that is what's holding them back. Ultimately, what holds kids back is avoidance. Because when kids start to rely on avoidance as a method of getting through the day, what they do is diminish their light, their creativity, their sense of adventure, their opportunities, and that sets them up for depression, which is a far more dangerous and close relative of anxiety. And we can see how closely related they are. So those are two things I would say for parents is talk about your own anxiety. Everyone has it. And also talk to kids about how avoidance is a kind of secret joy killer in life. And anxiety doesn't have to be. It's very uncomfortable, but it doesn't have to kill our joy.
Is there anything, Vanessa or Laura, that you want to add sort of from your experience of like just as a parent going through this whole process of making this film and what you learned along the way, and if it had, and did it have an impact on sort of how, I mean, obviously that was kind of your purpose for doing it, as we saw on screen, but you know what I mean, like just sort of how that shed light on your own experience and that of your, your peers.
Yeah, I think as a parent of, so I'm divorced and remarried, but my ex, the whole story about the two parents, one works for the cult leader, the other for the tough love one, and they're like this. With a divorce relationship, it was very complicated because I started seeing myself as working for the cult leader, and I can also say I understand why I did, and I always was thinking I'm being compassionate and empathetic, and I'm worried about my kid, and I'm trying to help her, and all of these things. But then also, just like you said too, this idea that maybe that was also a controlling thing of hoping so much I could make everything better instead of being able to say, yes, I see this is really scary, and we're still going through this. And then my ex being much more of that tough love, but then this really understanding of it really is this just lacking skills and just not knowing what to do. And you're just overwhelmed whichever approach you're taking. And then in that's your own anxiety that you start projecting on. So I think to me, just hearing some of these things named that I thought I was the one doing the good job, and then I would hear and think, okay, yeah, actually it's all of us, a little give and take. And it really does come down to some skills and breaking things down a little bit as parents. And again, like you said, we're all anxious and just doing our best.
Ashley, can you maybe talk about your the experience of kind of the range of your friends, your peers, sort of, and did they generally feel like they can take advantage of the resources that are made available to them at the places like the Wellness Center? Is that feeling like that's made an impact and that they know that they have some place to turn?
Oh yeah, 100%. And our job in peer resource is to make sure people know that those resources are there for them. And whether or not there are forks and rules, we have to say where we have to break confidentiality. But they are going to a safe place where they can feel comfortable talking to somebody, or if they don't feel comfortable talking to an adult, they can talk to one of us on our peer resource team, where we're trained on how to handle certain situations, but also give the person the feeling that they're safe and comfortable where they are and have the opportunity to come and get help for certain things they need.
So where there aren't schools with, with wellness centers, what are some, strategies and resources that you guys recommend or suggest, knowing that, not every, even in Marin, not every school has the benefit of those great resources? That is an open question.
Yeah. I mean, that is such a
Well, one thing that
huge-
we're doing with our film is that we want to make the film available to schools with no barrier to entry. So if a school wants to screen this film, we'll make it available. And it's as Vanessa said, it's a conversation starter for sure. But we feel like that was actually something that was eye-opening for me, how many schools in this country have no resources. And I think that needs to change. And I think we have to do better for our kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that, again, when we're looking at like what we're going to touch on in the film, there's the real personal stuff, and then there's the systemic issues, right? Where that does have to do with reimbursement rates and the amount of people that are training to become child and adolescent psychologists, psychiatrists, therapists. I mean, you can talk to your own profession of how difficult it is to then keep a career going when the reimbursement's not good, and then also the time and the amount of families that need help and families who can't afford those resources, and school nursing. People who are school nurses are not necessarily trained or have the time to be able to do the kinds of things that you need to do, and there's not enough preventive kind of work in schools. So again, in that bigger question of how we allocate resources, on a local level, state level, federal level, to our young people's mental health and teaching skills to children and to families. And we touched on it a tiny bit, but in emergency rooms as well. And again, I'm sure you can talk to this much more than I can, but just from seeing my own kids and their peers and going into emergency rooms when they have some kind of situation going on for them, and the emergency rooms are not equipped to deal with that, and it really escalates the situation. And so like Tim Story said in the film, the system, it's not that it's broken, it was never created.
And we've criminalized mental health. And, and that is, it's a big contributor to a lot of what we're seeing, especially culturally.
I will say one thing I noticed the school system is doing, at least our school system, is really integrating early skills into kindergarten. So all of the growth mindset curriculum that we're seeing in schools now, where kids learn that the focus of their self-worth that they want to cultivate, what they want to recognize in peers is the effort, the work that they put towards something, their intentions, as opposed to the outcome, which is beyond their control. So I see this, in my kids, even when I bake something and it gets burned, and I'm like, I'm so mad. I just spent an hour making this and I wanted you guys to have, my 8-year-old was like, Mom, it's the intention, it's the love that you put into the time that you took to mix that up. And we all see what you were trying to do. And I'm like, so I do think there's something that I didn't have even a concept of when I was in grade school about what it meant to be good, or doing well, or perfect. And I do think, and Ashley, I don't know if you had any of that as a kid, but I do think I'm seeing that more and more, that schools are aware of that kind of education and starting that very, very early.
Well, and Ashley, are you feeling like, because you have the resources in your school, but are there other places that you are getting what you need outside of that? Since obviously, school is a huge part of your day, but it's not all of it.
Yeah, so growing up, because of dyslexia, ADHD, it was like you have to have these outside resources. So from the help of tutors, from the help of therapists, from the help of friends around me, and we were given these concepts, growth mindset, bucket fillers. It's okay to make a mistake. It's okay to not know what you want to do. And that has been the biggest thing for my senior year so far, that I've been needing a lot of help and registering that it's okay that I don't know exactly what I'm going to do when I'm older. It's okay. Just enjoy your time and where you are, be in present, not the future, and don't worry about something that you can't control just yet.
Ashley, I think you are spectacular, by the way. You're really extraordinary.
We have a few. Just, I'm wondering if there are any pressing questions from the audience, since we have this great panel, and if anyone, as they have been processing all of this, if anyone has any questions. Yes, right there in the aisle.
So I'm seeing the kids in the film. I'm learning a lot about, as they're more evolved in understanding what their anxiety is. They're saying things like changing my environment, going to the gym, these strategies. And they all are this amazing array of strategies. But what does that little boy on the floor do? Like, he's not going to do any of that. Like, I don't understand how you get from the heat of the worst to where these other kids are. Mm-hmm. What do you do first?
I mean, I'll just say, just for him in those moments that you're seeing, obviously those are real crisis kinds of moments where things have escalated to a certain point. And I think that from what I understand with that family is them also learning skills to try to help support him before things would get to that kind of acute level that we really cut into something like at that space. And the video we were showing was time when they also didn't know what to do. And again, the dad would say, maybe just take a nap. And clearly, anxiety, when you're in anxiety, saying to somebody to calm down is like the opposite of what you would tell him to do,
to
right?
take a shower, take a nap, just to try to calm him down. But I will say that the family has come a long way, and they have worked very hard. The parents are not married, and I think you can sense that there's a lot of tension between them as well in what you see. But they've come a really long way. But Jonah has worked really, really hard. In fact, he came to a screening this past weekend with his therapist.
Yeah.
So,
but and also I think you bring up a good point too, though. Obviously, again, like this film shows lots of kids with very different kinds of experiences, and the kinds of things that they're going through obviously are unique to them. And so, right, where one person might be able to say, okay, I can sit and I can focus on the present, and that's going to get me through this moment. That's fine for one person, and it's going to be different for someone else. Yeah, so we didn't mean to sort of say, yeah, when he's doing that and hitting an iPad on his head, if he just, again, like thinks of the present, he's going to be okay. That might not be the case for that moment for him.
Yeah, and I would say in a situation like that, he's sort of at an age where he's halfway between a temper tantrum and a panic attack. Mm-hmm. And so the most important thing that parents can do is just, first of all, make the environment safe. Right. So take the iPad away. It's really concrete stuff, because kids aren't reasonable. Like, they're not reasonable when they're having a temper tantrum. A panic attack looks much more reasonable, but that's probably what he's experiencing, but without that bodily control yet because of his age and just where his brain is developmentally. And then you can just say, buddy, I'm going to take this away from you because we got to make the environment safe. And I'm just going to give you space. And, this is rough and it'll pass. It always does. Mm-hmm. And then you just give the kids space. You stay present and you make sure that they're safe. And there's nothing you can do to stop that. And there's nothing they can do to stop that. It's sort of like their brain is just firing a whole bunch of stuff that it has to fire. And then we have to wait for the brain to kick in and bring them down from that place, which it always will. But it's a lot of it is just tolerating seeing your kid in a lot of distress and sitting with that and trying to keep yourself okay in that moment, really checking in with your own well-being in that moment and reminding yourself that it will pass as well.
Yeah. There was an answer there.
So you talked about how, everyone gets anxious, and I feel like in part because this is also forefront in the conversation these days, and it's all become normalized and destigmatized, which is wonderful. But some of these, do you find that teenagers who just experience some normal anxious feelings or nervousness are now suddenly
characterizing themselves as suffering from anxiety, or how do you know which it is? At what point do they cross over into this disorder or truly needing help, or it's just normal nervousness and anxiety that everyone experiences?
Just to repeat the question, so that, how do you know when you sort of cross that line between, sort of standard, anxiety that we all face and can get over to, an actual disorder where there's serious treatment that's needed?
Yeah, that's an easy one. It's fear of fear. So all of us will have anxiety and will say, I'm anxious about a thing. A kid who says that they're anxious about getting anxious, that they're scared about when the next panic attack is going to come, or that they're worried that their OCD will get in the way of taking the test, or that they're terrified that they won't be able to sleep because they didn't sleep last night. That is where it starts to become an anxiety disorder. And you start to get this looping relationship where the brain actually develops a threat response to its own threat response. And that's like a storm and a loop. And so one of the first things that we want to do is just help people be less anxious about being anxious. And it's not to say, kids with an anxiety disorder are more anxious about anxiety. They have much stronger anxiety. They're generally very physiologically sensitive. So they need to learn that this reactivity that they have that looks and feels a lot stronger than other people who they're watching react, have a fear response to things like a test. They have to understand their response is much, much stronger, but it's still just a guard dog. It's just very loud. And maybe it's had some bad experiences in the past. And so it's going to take more soothing than their peer who's sitting next to them. So it's really that fear of fear that differentiates anxiety from an anxiety disorder.
I'd also say that I work with a lot of students who don't have, who wouldn't be diagnosable, but once they've experienced a panic attack, it's your body's way of saying there is something seriously wrong and it's time to pay attention. So I'd say, and in addition to that, if it's getting in the way of your daily life, if it's impacting your ability to go to school, to be able to complete your work, it's interrupting your relationships, there's a problem.
Oh, yes, over there.
I'm curious whether there's a relationship between anxiety and executive function deficiency, whether they feed off each other.
Question is if there's a link between anxiety and executive function.
ADHD and anxiety, 100%. Oh my God. Like 100%. Because my ADHD is personally with me, as I see it, I can be in a math class. I'll be trying to focus on the board. If somebody is tapping a nail on a table next to me, I will not hear a single portion of what a teacher just said to me. Even if it is directly in my face in the front row, I hear someone clicking their tongue or tapping their foot. I'm not going to focus or learn a single thing. So when that happens, it feeds into, oh my God, I just missed this. And then it goes in a full cycle over and over again, where it's like, what just happened? I don't know what happened. How can I do the homework? Once the homework's done, how do I do the test? If I don't do well on the test, how are my grades going to be good? How's my GPA going to stay? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? How am I going to go to college? How am I going to get in? All from somebody snapping their finger in my ear, picking up on it, and me not focusing on the board. So my anxiety especially dwelled from school and academically since I got diagnosed late with all these different things. And nobody really knew how to help me in the moment because we didn't know what was going on. So the combination of not being able to concentrate on the smallest thing, picking up in my ears, or ADHD, a million different thoughts running through my head because I'm so bored listening to whatever the teacher is saying that I don't want to think about or care for at the moment. Yeah, they tie into each other 100%.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, because Ashley described it to a T, which is, in the brain is it's a prediction machine. So it's it's scanning the environment constantly. And we have what we call bottom-up information, which is like someone tapping on the desk next to you, also the teacher talking. And then we have top-down information or top-down attention coming from the executive functioning areas of the brain that say, I want to go to college, or I want to focus on what the teacher is saying, or I want to finish my homework before, study hall ends. That top-down attention in a very physiologically sensitive brain and body always gets overrode by bottom-up attention. And as the brain grows, and what we see in different kinds of therapy, mindfulness therapy, DBT that they were talking about, CBT, acceptance and commitment therapy, all these therapies that really focus on helping the individual to sort of wrestle top-down control over what's coming in from the environment, what's sort of being channeled in through their amygdala and grabbing their attention. And you can see those parts of the brain grow that compensate, that actually exert executive top-down control over other parts of the brain. So that's something that you can see in imaging studies after people go through therapy, which is pretty cool because the brain is so plastic.
So I'm afraid we are out of time. I'm reminded Vanessa has to get on the plane.
Nobody else has to be out of time.
I suppose.
But I can go.
Because Vanessa needs to catch her flight. I think we also have another. Do we have time for any more over there?
Well, I'm going to sneak off, but I'm going to thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
Because I think we did have one more question right there.
So when teens are learning and applying coping mechanisms, when is medication not good or good to be? As a parent, I'm like, no.
Yeah. The question is about when it is good or not good to introduce medication into the equation when you're dealing with different coping strategies.
Yeah, I think it's, I like to see if people can exhaust other things first that encourage some change in neuroplasticity. So I love for people to be exercising. That's something I'll prescribe in my practice. And so, that will do a lot of what medications will do. The class of meds we use the most for anxiety are the SSRI class. They do not correct a chemical imbalance. It's not that people have a chemical imbalance. What they do is promote a state of increased neuroplasticity in the brain, which is mediated by serotonin, but it's anxious people don't make less or have less serotonin than anyone else. So it's really, are we doing everything else that we could be doing to support someone? Or to the earlier point that if somebody's really incapacitated and this is getting in the way of school and functioning, this is a pretty treatable illness from the standpoint of medication. So it's kind of a mix of personal preference and also, do you want to try some other things first? And I think with regard to medications, the most important thing to understand, which probably many of you are aware, is starting many of these classes of meds, people feel more anxious before they feel better. They're activating for the first usually month or so before they even start to take effect. So I think physicians can set expectations. Parents can get really informed. Teens can get really informed about what to expect, how fast to go. So that we don't end up making kids feel overwhelmed, more agitated, engaging in risky behavior because they feel so overwhelmed or they expected to feel better and they're feeling worse. So a lot of it is just setting expectations.
There's a student that was that I work with who's taking an abnormal psychology class at COM right now, and came in and we were talking about it. She was like, "Love this class, it's amazing." I was like, "Great, tell me which disorders you're learning about." And so she went through and she's like, "Oh, but it's so boring because I can't believe there's all these disorders." And they basically say to treat them all the same. I was like, tell me what it says. And she's like, connection to others, sleep, nutrition, exercise. And it's true. These are the cornerstones of mental health. And it's really not very sexy, but they really are. I find that there's a lot of times I'm trying to find new and exciting ways to repackage like the basics where you're like, okay, but you really only have to look at a kid who's been up too long and find like one small thing will happen and they'll fall apart, like melting down. I'm like, yep, that's pretty much me too. Like if I've only gotten 5 or 6 hours of sleep and I have one small challenge, I cannot face it with humor or grace if I'm tired. So I feel like we think as we age, we shouldn't have those same expectations for ourselves and our mental health, but they really are.
Yeah, there's a question over there.
I think this question is probably for Tracy. So in addition to the exercise piece and the therapy piece, and possibly medication, so what kind of a person, like David, functional medicine person, somebody can contribute, and what is the contribution perceptible for like the actual gut biome? Because I find that one of my kids that if she's taking her probiotics, nice. Not, I look in the drawer and I'm like, how long has that been missing? Have we been out of that? Oh, a couple weeks. Oh, okay. And then also like other medicines that affect your hormones have a very positive effect. So where's the pieces? How do you access that?
There are so many pieces. That's the hard thing. And everybody needs different pieces. But yeah, you bring up the microbiome. And I think you're alluding to some other sort of nutritional imbalances that people can have. And I do think there's a whole arm of complementary medicine that pays much more attention to this than traditional Western medicine, which is like, you know, there must be a chemical imbalance, so we'll give you this drug. The microbiome definitely plays a role. There are a ton of different nutritional deficits that can contribute to anxiety. And so I think a lot of it is, it's tricky because it's even just the complexity of knowing what sources to trust about where you get advice to seek care. And so I think the most important thing that matters is finding a care team that feels very invested in you and supportive of you, and doing a lot of your own homework and really paying attention to your kid and having your kid pay attention to their own body and what works for them. And really barking up every tree, but with that kind of, we may never find the perfect combo of things because a lot of this may just be sensitivity, and you will always have a sensitive system. And so what we're looking for is not necessarily to avoid all triggers, but to just support and bolster your unique physiology as best we can, and then go forward into life knowing that there will be unexpected things that kind of unsettle your sensitive system sometimes. And then you'll play around with things to figure out what makes you feel better.
Yes.
This is bad timing, but I was curious to hear more about the artwork. The artwork is so powerful and how it's woven through.
The question is about the artwork in the film.
Sure. So as you saw at the end of the film, we curated this artwork from kids from all over the world. And so it's all original artwork. And Vanessa and I were playing around with the idea of originally using some photography that we had found. And the photographer didn't want us to use her photography because the subjects, it was so personal to the subject. She didn't feel like it should be tied to somebody else's story. So we really started trying to think about other ways so that this just wasn't a talking heads film, right? So that, but we wanted it to tell its own story. And it's quite remarkable. When I got something like 40 pieces of art from my daughter's middle school, and when I returned the artwork back to the principal and the school counselor, I said to them, you should really look at this before you give it back to the kids, because this is what's going on in your school. And so it was really authentic, I think, for those kids to be able to take that emotion and put it down. And, art is such a wonderful tool for anxiety. So it was a great assignment for, but we reached out to schools, art schools, anybody we knew in education, basically. And then that just kind of led us to a global curating of this art.
Really nice addition. Can you maybe wrap us up with, you mentioned that you want to make this film available to schools anywhere, just how anyone will, I mean, you guys are sort of just at the early stages of your festival run, but like how people will ultimately be able to access the film.
Yeah, so Vanessa and I were talking about it today. We're 30 days into our festival run, and this is our 7th screening in 30 days. So the film is being really well received. We are in the process of making a distribution deal, which we will announce on our website after the first of the year, anxiousnation.com, if you want to check it out. But we have a lot of strategy in place also to not only make the film available, but curriculum, so that we will have curriculum in classrooms and parents can have curriculum, and a lot of tools and a lot of takeaways that we want to give.
Well, and to that, we also have some handy questions on the way out that Jessica from the Wellness Center drafted. So we have some additional resources for you guys on your way out. Thank you guys all so much for being here. Thank you, Ashley, for coming out on a school night, and everyone. Thank you guys for being a great audience. It's been a pleasure.